This is the OverReaction podcast.
Chun,
Jeremy,
welcome.
thanks.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too, man. How are you
It'll
doing?
be fun on the Overreaction podcast. You can overreact, which is great. So anyway, how you been?
Oh, it's been crazy. We've been really busy. Actually just got back from a trip to Canada for some R&R. We were actually up in Jasper and Yoho and Banff National Park. So that was a fantastic time, and great
That's
to
I grew up just south of Calgary, so I've been over there many times. So
Oh yeah.
so why'd you choose up there, and what'd you do?
Well, it was my wife is great at planning all these trips. So
Okay,
usually
of
she
course.
just drags me out of the country and I just follow. She does all the work and I do all the driving, right? So
Yeah, of course.
but of course what happened was, if you didn't know about it, there was a strike. WestJet, the airline, which is what we flew, they had a strike that week or a couple of weeks or something like that. So our
Oh,
plane our flight got canceled, and we were on hold for about 10 hours. Literally at the 10-hour mark, that's when someone at customer support finally picked up and helped us out, which was
Gosh.
a story in itself, right? Because we were on hold through the night. We went to sleep. We had both of our phones on hold, which was funny. At each 3-hour mark, they actually make you confirm that you still want to be on hold. So you got press 1 to stay on hold every 3 hours. We missed one on my wife's phone, and then we had to set an alarm every single time through the night. So finally got through. Finally ended up in Calgary, and the rest was pretty good for the most part, except for the fact that speaking of healthcare, right? I ended up in a Canadian ER while I was in Jasper.
That's scary, man. Canadian ER can be quite an adventure.
It was wild.
So what happened?
So we were touring. We went on like these glacier tours, right, which was just completely awesome. We love hiking. We love the mountains, and
Did you drink the water? Did they give you the?
so they told us to bring some bottles up and just drink it. If you want, you just kind of fill it up with your bottles and do what you want with it, right? It was kind of funny. We saw people dunking their faces in, and just kind of drinking it like little mountain goats. But we what happened was we toured on these kind of monster truck looking ice machines, right? They're huge. They're basically these trucks that are made for driving up these steep hills and mountains to get you on the glaciers. And of course, I'm an idiot, so I wasn't looking as I was, when we're going back up onto this monster truck, and I hit my head against the door, the sharp corner of this metal door, right? And it basically hit me right up here and right on top. And immediately just blood started gushing out just on my forehead, on my hands, right?
Oh man.
And the tour guide, they just started freaking out. They're like, oh my gosh, what do we do now?
Yeah, and heads bleeds like crazy too.
Oh yeah, it just kept on oozing and oozing. So we're in the middle of the glaciers. We had to get back on the ice truck to the bus station, right? And then from the bus station, we have to ride the bus back to the visitor center. And then from the visitor center, we have to drive 75 minutes over to the city of Jasper just to get into an ER. And man, that was just a wild trip.
You mean the village of Jasper? That's a small.
Yeah, it's actually very funny because the place was called Cottage Medical, right? That was the name of the place. Now, to be fair, it didn't look like a cottage. It actually looked like a legit somewhere between an urgent care center and a small ER. But they took care of me. Of course, they gave me a bill for like 700 Canadian dollars, right? Because I'm not Canadian, so healthcare isn't free there for us, and we just had to take care of that. I got
so 700 Canadians, like what, $100? Just kidding.
No, but the exchange rate ended up around like $500. So still a little bit, it would have been cheaper if I got it here, actually, surprisingly.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
It's all good now. Yeah.
Gonna have, at least people can't see the scar.
I hope so, as long as I don't go bald one day, right? So you never know.
You never know. No, You got that thick Stalin hair. You'll be fine.
Yeah, appreciate it. Well, thanks for having me here.
Yeah, I'd love to have you on, man. Just so let's talk about your background. Like, where you from? Where'd you grow up? What you went to school and how'd you get into healthcare?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in the awesome country of Malaysia, of all places. So I actually grew up in
Nice.
born in Malaysia, right close to the capital of Kuala Lumpur. Was raised there for a little bit. Moved to Vietnam, was subsequently raised there for a little bit too. Moved to Singapore, was raised there for a little bit. And then finally, my parents, and they had this whole master plan, right? You never really appreciate what they plan for you and they plan for their kids until you're a little bit older. But they said, hey, let's go get a better life overseas in the US. So we packed up everything and came over here. And this is where I went to high school. Obviously a huge culture shock for myself and growing up, but yeah, hey, I made it through. Was able
and where in the United States did you guys enter and then stick around?
Yeah, right here, north of Atlanta. So and I've been here ever since, right? And it's been great.
So why did your parents pick Georgia? Was there
So
something
she had so my mom had some relatives who had already immigrated here. So that kind of helped make things a little bit easier. I think the story was on my mom's side, her dad, right? So my grandfather, he had two siblings, one, an older sister and a younger brother. So my grandfather decided to stay put in Malaysia and raise everyone there, whereas his older sister decided to move her side of the family over to the States, and they decided to settle down in Georgia for whatever reason. So we had some connections here, and that's ultimately what drove us to moving here to Georgia.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And you went to university locally then, or did you go out of state?
That's right. Yep. So we stayed put. I managed to get into Georgia Tech. So very lucky. I probably, would not be able to get into that school today, right? But I managed to get in. I was, pre-med for a little bit, and then decided it was a little bit too expensive for us. So I decided to just pursue a career. I majored in biomedical engineering, where I got into a lot of research and devices and that kind of stuff, which was awesome. And I ultimately, we'll probably get into more of this, but ended up pivoting a few times, right? With my career, started out in healthcare IT and, landed back in it, which is exactly, what we're doing here. So.
Oh, nice. And then, so how did you start? So your main company's Diasyst, is that correct?
That's correct. So,
but you have a Reach 7 shirt on, so we gotta let's start with Diasyst, then get into which is probably more what I want to talk about is Reach 7, because I think it's a pretty novel idea.
Sounds good. I'll give you the skinny version, man. It actually started at Georgia Tech, and at Georgia Tech, great school, great public school, and great biomedical engineering program. They are just equipped with state-of-the-art research programs, research opportunities, and that's one of the things that I immediately nabbed as a freshman. I said, you know what? Yeah, let's get all into this. And I had the fortunate opportunity to join a research lab that was centered around type 1 diabetes, sort of bioengineering, tissue engineering solutions. We were trying to essentially create an artificial pancreas, right? And for those who aren't familiar with diabetes or type 1 diabetes specifically, basically your pancreas is shot. It's an autoimmune disease, and typically diagnosed fairly at a younger age, unfortunately. And what your body needs is insulin to sort of counteract all the glucose, all the carbs that you're consuming, to ultimately turn that into energy, right? It's just the basic building blocks of survival, okay? And unfortunately, people with type 1 diabetes, they need that insulin very regularly to essentially stay alive and function properly. So in that particular lab, I had the opportunity to be involved with all sorts of different research projects, from how do we harvest these pancreatic cells or insulin creating cells, not necessarily from humans, right? But maybe from some other animals that are sort of equivalent to what our bodies, how our bodies operate. And then how do you harvest those cells, right? How do you sort of protect them? How do you create some molecules or compounds that sort of protect them, and that way you can transplant them into the human body and keep them there, right? But there are all sorts of different applications around this, which was really cool, way before its time, obviously. But I got a lot of good experience in diabetes and was just astounded by just how many people were living with it. But even beyond that, the overall problem of diabetes in the country today, about 40 million Americans today, 10% of them having type 1 specifically. So,
and that's going up to the upper right.
Oh yeah, when I was in school, right, those numbers were about in the 20, like the low 20 or so millions. Now it's almost doubled, and that keeps continuing to go up exponentially.
Man.
Yeah. So, to bridge that to Diasyst, towards my last year of school there, we were, and again, Georgia Tech does a great job with giving the kids sort of these real world opportunities, right? Cutting edge opportunities to work on some really cool stuff. And I was paired up with a gentleman by the name of, I and a couple of other kids in our group. We were paired up with a brilliant endocrinologist and diabetes researcher over here at Emory University in the Atlanta VA Medical Center. Brilliant guy, been doing diabetes research, teaching, training, practicing for over 40 years at that point. Now probably about 50, close to 60 years now. It's insane how he's still, working 7 days a week. But, he basically had the idea of, let's use some of these new apps that, like what's this app thing, right? What's this iPhone thing that Steve Jobs back in the day, he was alive and showing it off, right? Let's use some of this technology to maybe improve how we manage diabetes, right? So, we dabble into that idea as part of our project, and ultimately develop the very, very, very first prototype of what we now know as Diasyst. And what was very fascinating about it back then was this was before the days of telehealth, right? This was before the days of mobile health. This was before the days of what everyone now knows is remote patient monitoring or chronic disease management or chronic care management. Literally the iPhone 4 or something had just came out, and we just started to have the ability to create these awesome applications around that. And we said, let's do it for diabetes. Okay. And long story short, over the past, oh my gosh, I don't know, it's been about 13 years now, almost 14 years now since we started this. It's evolved into what it is now, where we're really helping modernize and transform organizations across the country to really modernize how they take care of patients today. So pretty crazy journey.
Yeah, it's that is. And what's some of the headwinds that you ran into?
Oh man, being one of the first, if not the first in the marketplace to do something like this, it was crazy because there were very little examples to draw from, right? Like when you start something like this that early, let me back up. When you start anything in the first place, one of the first things you do is you try to compare, you try to do a lot of research around like what's out there, right? What are these other solutions doing? Oftentimes there is a starting point where you can really look at what's going on. But when we started, there was pretty much nothing, or there were very, very few solutions to even compare this to. So, you try, we spend a lot of years navigating it ourselves. We spend a lot of years navigating guidelines and regulatory, processes that weren't as mature as it is today, weren't as clear cut as it is today. including FDA approval. I mean, back in the day, our app, right, our solution, our platform as it is today, was strictly regulated by the FDA. You needed to get through FDA approval even to, get your solution out there, and which is kind of wild, right? You think typically for FDA approvals, you think about drugs, you think about pharmaceuticals, you think about devices, but not software, not applications, right? But back in the day, that was a big hurdle, and not only was a big hurdle to navigate because no one really knew where the FDA was going at that time. It obviously cost a lot of money and a lot of headaches and resources to navigate through that, right? The other big part on the regulatory side was reimbursement. There were no reimbursements around this. So, from a financial incentive standpoint, okay, great, you have a tool, you have an app that could help improve diabetes management. Okay, so what though? Because it's all about the money at the end of the day. What's in it for a healthcare organization? What's in it for a payer? What's in it for the patient? What's in it for the healthcare provider, the physician, to adopt something like this? And so, again, for many, many years since we started, a lot of these things just simply weren't in place. And we'll probably talk about COVID and the pandemic and how all that has changed, the landscape. But pre-COVID, right, pre-2019, pre-2018, it was wild. It was just this, black hole of nothingness, and people trying to figure out, yeah, we need these kinds of solutions, right? But how exactly is it going to work? How exactly is it going to pan out? And, I'll sum it up with this, last sentiment and sort of transition over to Reach 7 here and why we're doing this is, ultimately what we discovered was we weren't really in the app business. We weren't really in the software solution business. What we were actually doing was promoting an entirely new way of practicing medicine, of diabetes management. And what we found out, we were doing much more than just, pitching software and selling software and getting people using it. Is actually transforming their business first, transforming their practice first, in order to equip themselves with the software that we were selling. And so, change is very hard, right? Especially in healthcare, change can be, speaking of Glacier, it can move at a glacier pace. It does move at a glacier pace. And ultimately, we just decided, yeah, it's a lot easier to change the industry if you just go out and create your own practices and create your own clinics than it is, to change some of these organizations, hence the introduction of Reach 7 Diabetes Studio.
Yeah, I want to jump into that. I mean, so I've done so many calls. I've been in researching different things in healthcare for almost 21 years. No, more than that. Yeah, 21 years. And it is the hesitancy to change.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't be surprised anymore by how hesitant all across healthcare, everybody at every level is to change.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be surprised, but I still am, because you think in an industry that claims to be so scientific and claims to operate out of evidence-based medicine, in so many areas they don't. They really, really fight. Like, no, we're doing this. This pathway's been this way. And I'm like, yeah, but that was developed 50, 60 years ago when the food pyramid was accepted as an actual thing, like, but to get people to change, and they don't want to change. It's more of, no, help us help our patients, but we're going to do everything exactly the same we've always done. And it's, well, we see that in research. We have healthcare organizations, vendors, et cetera, using our platform to conduct research.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to adapt how they approach a physician or a patient or a CIO or a health plan or whoever they're trying to get research from. I said, well, that kind of impacts that. Changing your culture and changing your approach, your strategy is literally the horse before the cart.
Yep.
That's what has to happen. So I'm sadly not surprised by what you said, which I think is fascinating. It's like easier to start our own clinical practices than it is to try to just help someone existing, saying, help us, let us help you, help me help you, kind of thing. So that's, with that segue, I love it because I've got, you told me a little bit before, and it's so fascinating. So let's jump into it, man. Let's jump into that paradigm of it's easier to start our own clinical practice, try to get someone else to change even for the better.
Yeah, I mean, for what Diasyst is, and maybe let's back up a couple of steps and talk about what Diasyst really is in its form today. We are an AI powered. I hate using the word remote patient monitoring because it's so saturated now, but it ultimately is. It's a remote patient monitoring, and it's a chronic disease management platform with a lot of intelligence around it. We do a good job with gathering and compiling data that is now being gathered with all these wearables and devices that might be on the patient or in the patient's homes, and we just put it into one place so that a primary care provider or a nurse practitioner or physician assistant or endocrinologist or cardiologist can go in and see exactly what's going on and just do something about that, about that case, or treat that patient immediately. I know it sounds very simple conceptually, but trying to get a healthcare organization or provider to adopt that is just, it's crazy. It's ridiculously hard, right? You would think that, a tool like that can save you time, that could make you more money, and that could improve your outcomes, would just automatically be adopted everywhere. But the core of the problem wasn't the solution. It wasn't, we have all these regulations and reimbursements and policies out there now that encourages people to adopt this. The problem is, back to your point, it's hard to change. And the crux of it is the fact that most of our health system today, most of how we operate is very reactive, right? It's kind of, just like the name of your podcast, is that if I were to say we're actually overreactive, okay? In the sense that we just wait for people to show up with problems, and we just deal with those problems right then and there. Just like we just wait for people to end up in the ER. We just wait for people to end up in urgent care, right? And then we try to fix those problems, and then we're so caught up in that we forget to keep patients healthy, to prevent those problems in the first place. Same thing in ambulatory care. We're so used to the model of just, hey, let's see that patient every year. And that's all we're going to do. We're just going to see that patient every year, right? Or we're going to see that patient once every 3 months. And we're going to do absolutely nothing in between that time frame, which is really where all the problems occur. Okay.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And so trying to change that mentality so that we're more proactive, right? We're on top of these patients, particularly patients who are chronically ill. I mean, these are, I hate to use this term, but they're sort of ticking time bombs, in the sense that if an event happens, right, if they develop a complication, that is devastating to both the patient, but then the overall system as well. Okay. So it's our duty, okay, going back to healthcare, okay, we can't be overly reactive. We have to start being more proactive. And that change, okay, just from a mindset standpoint to a systemic standpoint to a policy standpoint, that's very hard to get people to start, thinking that way. And that's exactly why, even though we have all the resources in the world, we have one of the best tools out there and the solutions out there. I have one of the best teams out there, in the field, and lots of partners convincing people of making this change, right? Actually, when you do the math, it's just a lot easier to go open up your clinic and saying, hey, this is how we're going to do things, right? Forget everything you did. In our clinic, in our studios, we call them, this is how we're actually going to operate. We're going to be overly proactive, rather than be reactive. And just by tweaking that mindset from that top down, everything then just falls in line. And it's a lot easier.
So describe what your diabetes, I think you call them diabetes studios, right? Is that the proper term?
That's right. I mean, on paper, they're still medical specialty clinics. But what we wanted to do was, as we change that mindset internally, right, we wanted to also show that externally into the marketplace too. So we call our clinics Reach 7, and this is one of the brands that we first launched. Hopefully over the next couple of months or so, we'll be able to announce some other brands of clinics we're going to be launching too, enabled by Diasyst. But Reach 7 being one of the first brands, we call it Reach 7 Diabetes Studio because of a few things. Number one, Reach 7, what does 7 mean? If you're familiar with diabetes, oftentimes the goal for many diabetic patients is to get their A1C, their hemoglobin A1C levels down to below 7%, which is why we call it Reach 7.
Cool.
And on top of that, we call it a studio because we wanted it to be different. We wanted it to look different, feel different from what you typically see out there. We have a whole strategy around retail. We actually, this first studio that we opened is actually right next door to a public shopping center, which for us was very important because for a chronically ill diabetic patient, right, a lot of the treatment, a lot of the care that needs to go with that patient is around how they shop, how they eat, what their lifestyle is, and the medications that they are likely picking up from the pharmacy next door. So just
you can get the Walmart mental. You get the Walmart health centers on the cheap. They're selling all those. So
maybe
you grab their real estate.
That's right. That's right. But we by putting it right in those shopping centers, people know where we are. People can find us, which is surprisingly another whole problem with a lot of diabetes centers. A lot of medical practices are kind of tucked away in some medical plaza, which most of the time looks very depressing. That's off the street somewhere, and you don't even know where to find them. But by putting our studios front and center, where there are literally tens of thousands of vehicle traffic and foot traffic going by every single week, we get to let people know that, hey, we're here to help. It's okay. There's a lot of stigma along with diabetes as well, where a lot of times people are either scared to seek treatment or they are just uninformed. About 25% of diabetics are actually undiagnosed. So they're walking around with diabetes, but they don't know it and no one knows it. So, by just being there, we allow people to come on in, ask about our services. We actually provide a free screening to the public. So if you want to get screened for diabetes, you can come get in for free. And then from there, we'll help, create a plan for you to get better. Whether or not you join our clinic or not, it doesn't really matter. But at the end of the day, we just want people to know, and we want people to be healthy and get better.
That's great. And you opened your first studio was 2 months ago?
Oh, we just soft opened about 6 weeks ago. So, and even with that, our studio is not even fully completed as of today. We still have some shelves and cabinets we got to get in there. But, we had the staff, we had we had some marketing out already, and we just said, let's just go start seeing patients. And, we've been seeing quite a lot of patients since then, getting some great experience. We signed up a several number of members, which is awesome. And we're taking good care of them. So it's panning out to be, pretty good.
And how are patients here, besides being in the, going by it at Publix, what are you doing to kind of enroll and get the word out to patients? The healthcare consumers, but
yeah, about half, close to half of the patients signing up are actually walk-ins, believe it or not. And so just by being in that retail side, just by being exposed to the general public like that, that's actually been very helpful for our business. The other half mostly come from online. So, we've got a great Facebook, Instagram, Google strategy. It's actually appalling how hard it is to Google a medical practice sometimes, but that's where people are going to. People are Googling, what is diabetes, right? Like, how can I seek treatment? How can I get help? What does it even mean? Because most of the time, when patients unfortunately get diagnosed, they receive absolutely zero education about it. And they basically say, hey, Jeremy, you have diabetes, right? I'm going to throw some medications at you. Good luck, buddy. I'll see you in 3 or 6 months. And of course, what's the first thing you're going to do when you go home? You're going to Google the crap out of it to see, what sort of things you can do, right? So between those two, we've really been getting the majority of our traffic. And something that's starting to happen more recently is we're starting to get some physician referrals as well, which is great. So
That's awesome. And so what all kinds of services do you provide? What kind of clinicians do you have?
yeah, so the clinic itself is endocrinology supervised. So we have an endocrinologist on staff who's supervising our whole team. The key staff members that we have at the studios are, someone at the front, our awesome concierge who really just takes care of everything and makes everything flow well. And I start with that because that is so important, right? Just being able to be responsive and talk to people out in the streets, right? If they want to come in, educate them on our services, pick up the phone. I mean, you will be astounded to hear how often many practices don't even pick up their phones or call their patients back, right? Just so that component of the practice is super important. But, in terms of our clinical staffing, we really have our nurse practitioners, our advanced practice providers, NPs and PAs, as well as a registered dietitian. And that's really the rockstar team that really sees and, touches and examines and diagnoses and treats the patients. And the way we do things is it's a little bit different from your typical traditional practice, right? The first thing we do to get patients in the door is really through our free screenings and our free evaluations. It's, like I said, about 25% of diabetics are walking around not knowing that they have diabetes. So we'll do a full screening, takes about 25 minutes or so. We'll get their A1Cs done so we know where they are, whether they're pre-diabetic or diabetic or really, really diabetic, right? We'll do a full, review of systems, get your vitals, get your weight, get your blood pressure, just to kind of see where you are. And then based on all that information, we'll, carve out a care plan that will be appropriate for you. Like I said earlier, whether or not you join us to help, so that we can work together to get you better or not, or you go somewhere else, we don't really care. But ultimately, we just want you to know where you are. So if they do decide to join us, what we then do is we curate a very personalized program for them. Pretty much, it almost always involves some element of monitoring, right? Because we want our members to know where they are at all times, and that's really where Diasyst comes in too. So we're typically monitoring their blood glucose levels, we're monitoring their A1Cs, we're monitoring their blood pressure and/or their weight. And depending on what the objectives or the treatment goals are for that particular member, we work on very regular and small bite-sized lifestyle and therapeutic changes to help get that member to go, which is very different from typical practices, typical clinics, because again, what often your traditional practice would do is throw a couple of prescriptions at you and say, good luck, right? Jeremy, you got to lose some weight, good luck. Here are 1,000 things you got to do, good luck, right? And what we do is we try to break down, okay, there are all these things that, have led, that member to their current condition, to their current state, which could be their sleep behavior, it could be their stress levels or their stress management. It almost usually is their diet and their lifestyle and their nutrition intake. Hydration is a big issue. A lot of people are drinking Cokes and Mountain Dews every day instead of water. So that's something we help with a lot.
Don't eat your calories, don't drink them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And obviously we prescribe the latest and greatest therapies if appropriate for that particular member too. So we take a very holistic approach, right? A lot of patients, obviously, they are on medications or they want to get off medication, so we help them with that. On the flip side, some patients definitely need some medications. So what we do is we actually help navigate across all the dozens and dozens of options of medications that are available today for diabetes alone. I mean, there are about 100 different options, right? Where do you start from? What do you pick? And so we actually sit down with the member and talk through, hey, this is what this does, right? This is a weekly drug, it's an injection versus this is a pill, right? That you have to take every day. This could cause some nausea. This could, have these side effects, right? No one takes the time to spend with that patient, right? They usually just toss out a prescription that first comes to their mind. But we actually sit down with the patient, educate them on all the options, and get that patient to buy in on what they want to sign up for, because that ultimately will also drive compliance and outcome, right? So it's just a lot of hand holding, a lot of coaching, a lot of regular, go making, go realigning, go achieving, right? We try to break it out into weekly or bi-weekly sessions so that we can ultimately, get that patient to those goals. So that's how we set up our program. We're sort of creating this like a membership program, right? No different than some of these fitness studios, and that's why we call it a studio too. And once we work on one thing, we move on to the next. Once we achieve that, we move on to the next. And there, for any of these members, there are thousands and thousands of things that we can work on together. So
are you starting to see patients or consumers coming in and just like, I need some Ozempic? Like,
it's interesting because where we are in the industry today is there's so many of those shops now. There's so many of those weight loss clinics and the Ozempic clinics and Zepbound clinics. It's crazy. In fact, where we are physically in our first studio at the public shopping center, a couple of suites down, there is one of these clinics. So, we position ourselves as not a competitor, to be honest with you. And when we started this, we explicitly said that we were not going to be like one of these mills. And the reason for that is because, and if you really want to dig into how some of these shops operate, right? Unfortunately, they make a lot of money from dispensing that drug. And, some clinics, they do a great job. Yeah.
All doing is they're a channel for the pharmaceutical company. They're not.
That's exactly right. And as a business, right, if that is your incentive, then more than likely what you will try to do is write as many of those scripts as possible. And to a certain extent, and we have seen this before in the industry, there's been a lot of overprescribing, that happens. There's been a lot of unnecessary prescribing that happens, because ultimately that's what their business model is. That's what drives their profit margins. So the way we position ourselves is, if people do come in and see us asking for that, right? We've actually positioned ourselves as more of a very, unadulterated, truly medical, truly holistic practice, where even though that is one of the things that we do prescribe, right? We actually talk to the patient about, here are all your different options and here are all the pros and cons about it, including the costs associated with it. Weight loss is, even with the presence of Ozempic, it's not something that happens instantaneously, right? There's always a cost to it. And one of the issues with taking Ozempic with the weight loss is you're not just shedding fat, you're shedding a lot of muscle mass as well. And that's a big issue. And, so one of the services we do provide is with the dietitian. Yeah, we actually help them supplement that with a appropriate diet, appropriate meal plan to make sure that they're supplementing themselves with the protein.
Yeah, and it's really good you're doing it because, I've never had a weight problem. I've always been really lucky. I've been super active mainly because I got too much energy. It's not planned to do. I got a mountain bike. I got to run canyons. Just got to do it.
Yeah.
I had an issue, but I still, anytime there's like a big buzz about something, I would like to research it, because typically it's always more of a psychological, sociological phenomenon, almost than anything else. Like, as humans, especially in the day of social media, we kind of you just get these rockets rolling down the hill and you just can't stop it. So I've watched some scientific interviews and podcasts about, all these semaglutides, these GLP-1s.
Mm-hmm.
They started, interesting is some of these, Chun, recently have talked about that eating isn't just a way to get food. It's a part of your emotional connection. And so that they've had people who've gotten really depressed and committed suicide because their joy of eating is now gone when they're on these GLP-1s.
100%.
It's a massive void that, okay, you're shedding weight. And like you said, you're shedding lean muscle, lean tissue, which, always happens when you lose weight, but it happens way more with these GLP-1s, which is in itself a problem, especially as people are elderly. But all of a sudden there's this psychological void, and like, you're not treating that. Like, especially these pill mills, like I also like these Purdue pharmaceutical opioids now, but it kind of is like that, right? It's these pill mills for these GLP-1s. And it's like, you're not solving a big part of the issue. You're not acting as a consultant. You're not trying to holistically give them the right tools for them, not just the right tools for a general population, the right tools for them, including from a psychological perspective and listening and giving them the right plan. And that's where so I'm glad you're doing that, because that's what everyone else is missing. That they're just not addressing that at all.
Well, one of the big problems, one of the big things we try to re-educate is how to eat and how to drink. It's actually astounding. I mean, you think back to when you were young, was anyone really taught how to eat or drink ever? You're kind of fed what your parents fed you, right? And that was it. And no one really knew what they're putting in their bodies. No one really knew, when they're advertised something in the shelves or on TV and they buy that, whether it's a cereal or a soft drink, or, if they go out to eat socially, right? There's a big social component too. And we as social beings, eating can be very religious to a lot of people. What you eat, how you eat, when you eat, and drink for that matter. A lot of what we do is actually re-educate people how to eat and how to drink again. And that's one of the big reasons why we have a registered dietitian on staff, and not just have a registered dietitian on staff, but we have a whole education room where, if you actually, look up some photos on Google on our first studio, we have these shelves, right, all across the room with some common grocery items, from cereals to drinks to Coke and snacks and bars and whatever, right? And we lay it all out, and we play a little quiz with a lot of our patients and try to get them to answer questions around how many carbs and how much sugar do you think is in one of these. Yeah. And behind each one, we actually have this little like potion vial, right? That's this big. And when people try to guess how much sugar might be in a Mountain Dew, for example, okay, they have no idea, right? They have no idea how much it is. They have no idea what it even looks like. But a 20-ounce bottle of Mountain Dew, guess how much it has? It has 77 grams of sugar. And no one really, and I say 77 grams, you might know, you might have a sense of how much that is. You might not. Most people don't.
But when you fill them in a volume,
measure it. Yeah, when you actually fill it in a bottle like this, right? It's like this much, okay? And people go, holy crap, I never knew, right? Like, some people, if they drink coffee, for example, and they know how much sugar they're putting into their coffee, usually it's maybe a few teaspoons, right? But I'm telling you, with a Mountain Dew at 77 grams, that's a little over 5, not teaspoons, tablespoons of it. And it's just ridiculous. So you walk through all these different foods and all these different drinks, and all of a sudden that aha moment goes off, and they never knew because they've been doing this since they were young. Their parents said it was okay. Or they think apple juice or orange juice, because it's a fruit juice, right? Oh, it's fruit. Fruits are healthy, right? They think it's okay to drink it, but it's actually just a sugar drink, and that's all it is. Even with cereals, we and I myself, I'm personally an offender of this, right? But we lay out a whole bunch of different cereal options, from Frosty Flakes, right? Which, as you can imagine, that all it is just sugar, to Cheerios, which is on the healthier side. And then some of these other package options that look like it's healthy, right? It's got dried fruit and a whole bunch of stuff in it. So you think it's healthy, But you actually look at the nutrition labels, and that's another thing we teach people how to read. When you look at it, it's actually worse than the Frosted Flakes. So it's just mind blown for a lot of these people. And that's something that we help out, with a lot. So not to mention, by being next to the grocery store, one of the services we do provide is, let's just go next door. Let's, teach you how to shop, teach you how to buy stuff, right? Because when you're out there in the produce aisle, the fruits aisle, or the snack aisle, a lot of people just grab what looks good on the packaging. They grab what's bright and colorful, and that may not necessarily translate to something that might be good for them in the long run.
Yeah, that's showing that visual aspect. We're making people think through, okay, here, let's recreate your 20-ounce Mountain Dew or Coke or Pepsi, whatever it is. Here's the water in it. All right, here's sugar. Stop when you think.
That's right.
And they go, you're like, no. What? No. What? And they get the 5 big, huge tablespoons. You're like, yeah, and it's the same thing with, like, we try to, my kids are older now, but my wife was always really, she was just always challenged everything. No matter if a doctor told her anything, and she's not into like essential oils going to cure cancer, nothing like. But it was always just, this just doesn't, like, hang on a second. And so she would look at, she diluted our kids when they were kids, apple juice. If she had apple juice or orange juice, she'd dilute it by half, like 50% water and then 50%. And then they got older, she's like, I don't know about this anymore. And you start looking at it and you're like, wow, someone drinks an 8-ounce glass of orange juice. That's like 4 freaking oranges. And it's like eating 4 oranges in like 30 seconds. Well, your pancreas is going to go ballistic trying to produce enough insulin to handle that. It's like, so it's like
not 4 oranges, right? It's actually the juice from the 4 oranges. You're throwing away all the fiber and all the good stuff along with it.
And also it's the timing rather than it's slowly coming in and your digestive tract, your pancreas being able to, okay, cool. All right, something's coming in here. You're just hanging it. So it's like, eat the fruit, try to drink it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, there are all these little things too, where people don't know. I mentioned hydration, just drinking water, probably 9 out of 10 people that we see aren't drinking enough water, right? Or they don't know how to drink water. They don't know the impacts of just drinking water, period. Throughout the day. How, a lot of the times it's the frequency of how you eat, right? So, back to your point around sort of spreading it out a little bit or timing it in a different way, or even with the same exact meal, right? Eating the protein first instead of the carbs, right? Because there's some absorption that happens, with the carbs that if you eat a certain way or in a certain order or drink, a certain way or order, that's going to help reduce the amount of stress on your pancreas with the amount of insulin that you have to produce to help keep your blood sugars on track. So there are all these little things that people can just do, but because we've been primed for the past 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, however many years we've been alive of doing things a certain way, it's so hard to reverse a lot of those habits. And that's exactly why, we need this regular coaching. We need someone, which is what our studio provides. We need people to hold these members accountable, remind them of doing these things, right? Because what we're trying to do is reverse, like I said, 4, 5, 6 decades of innate behavior that they don't even know that they're doing, right? And we're trying to reverse, one behavior at a time to get them back to, where they really should be in the first place.
Yeah, that's great. I really do like the holistic approach because that's the only way to do it, because you can't and all the quick fix things they work for almost nobody, because someone will spend 10 years or 15 years, not exercising very much, not staying active, eating pretty poorly, not getting the right hydrating enough, not having like good salt. And like, it's interesting between like a nephrologist is like, you need more sea salt, like you got to get more salt in it, et cetera. And then a cardiologist is like, no salt. So as a patient, what am I supposed to do? So they spend so much time, years and years and years, developing who they are as a life or what their lifestyle is. And then all these fad things. They hear just take this drug and do this massive amount of exercise, and now you're going to become a new person. It's like that does, except unless it's like a life or death. Like I just had a near death experience or I had a big religious conversion. Nobody does. No one goes from here's how my life's been to now right now I have a new plan. I just become a new person.
Yeah.
Like, no, it takes a while, but in today's world and even in today's medical profession, everything feels just like a quick fix and a band-aid thrown on it. There isn't this realization. It's going to take a while for them to become a new person in this area, to unlearn all the habits before, develop new good habits that will fill the same void and even more than existed before while they got out of it. And it's just like, no, come in, get the drug, check in with you every once in a while, whatever, and good luck. And you have to know that most of the doctors know that they're not really changing anything. They're putting a Band-Aid on the problem right now, and they know they're going to be back, and they know they're going to be back, and it's just going to be ad infinitum.
I think a lot of it's just a result of how the system has been set up for us, right? It's first of all, this is what we've been taught to do, in our training, and in medical school and residency, in the places that we receive all of our healthcare education and professional experience. This is just how things are in a lot of places, unfortunately. It's also it's also stemming from the fact that there's a lot of pressure to turn a profit, even just keep it in the black, right, for a lot of these organizations, trying to navigate what are the latest payment models, what are the latest reimbursement opportunities, right, and services out there, which may or may not necessarily align with what might be best for providers and patients, but it's because of a lot of this pressure that we end up, and I'm not pointing fingers at anything or anyone specifically. I think it's just a combination of so many different factors coming to play. What we end up is exactly the quick fixes, hey, let's just churn patients in, churn patients out, right? Do what we can with whatever limited time we've got, and then see the next patient, and not have many opportunities to really follow up or check in with what's going on with that patient in particular. And that is especially criminal in our space, in the chronic disease management space, or patients with diabetes or other chronic conditions. We need to change that. And unfortunately, the system, for the most part, is just not set up for a lot of success there.
Yeah, well said, man. So we're almost out of time, but what's next for you guys? Like, so you have the Columbus site, it's going well, it's growing, still have some kinks to work out, but by and large, good momentum. So what's next?
Oh, we want to get this everywhere. Our vision is to prop up as many of these studios as possible across as many communities that really need it. We're based here in Georgia. Georgia's in the southeast. Southeast is where a lot of these problems are, unfortunately, or fortunately for us, right? We're in a good place to really create these studios and help a lot of people in desperate need. So our objective is to break ground in a couple more of these by the end of this year, and we'll just kind of see what happens.
That's great. Well, if you can send me your Instagram, your Facebook links, I'll put I'll put them in the description below. Also, a link to I think I have the website already, but if you can send it a link to your website or to your LinkedIn profile. So we'll include all that in description. So if anyone has any questions, wants to learn more, etc., they'll have all those links in the description.
I'll do that.
Awesome, man. Well, we should do this again at the end of the year. I want to see how the progress continues, because I'm a huge, even though I'm not a client, I probably won't be a client. I have lots of friends. If you were in Utah, Idaho, etc., over here, I'd be like, you need to go check out as well. In fact, I should get you sometime talking to my brother. He's a scientist at BYU, and he's a pathophysiologist. A lot of people call him the keto doctor, and he's not an MD. He's a cellular biologist. He studies what goes on in the cell and looks at, and insulin resistance is a huge part of his research focus. So you guys would probably geek out a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, man.
Sure.
John, have an awesome weekend, my friend.
Likewise. Thanks for having me again, Jeremy. It was great talking to you.
You, buddy. Take care.
Yep. Bye-bye.